So we took these photos on a camera that cost just $65. Do you think it was worth it? In today's video, we are reviewing the Kodak Ektar H35N. So this is a half frame 35mm camera that can be yours for just around $65. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. We have never spoken to Kodak, we just bought this for a bit of fun and to see what kind of images we could shoot on a super budget film camera. This is, by the way, the latest version of this camera. There is also a previous model, the H35, which can also be found for a little bit cheaper. But in my opinion, you are better off spending a little bit extra and getting the newer model for reasons we'll cover in this video. By the way, if you are new here and you like the content that we make, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really does help out our channel. So let's start talking about the half frame. So what is that? So a normal full frame 35mm film camera will give you about 36 exposures, or 24 depending on the film stock. So this is due to the resolution of the images and the length of the film roll. However, this camera takes 2 pictures on the same amount of space that would otherwise have been just a single exposure, so instead of 36 shots you get 72. So on top of this camera being already very cheap to begin with, you're also effectively getting doubled exposures for your money every time you load up a fresh roll of film. So this camera looks and feels very similar to the disposable film cameras you can find, but it's also reusable, so it's a lot more environmentally friendly. Sadly, due to how complex it is to separate materials in disposable cameras, most of them do end up in landfills and are pretty terrible for the environment. If we compare the size and thickness of this camera to some of my other cameras, you will see that this is a really compact and travel-friendly camera. It's also only 110 grams, so very light and very portable. The build quality is what you'd expect at this price point. It's very plasticky and I don't think it's the most durable camera in the world. You'll see that there are a lot of plastic elements like where you load the film and the buttons and the springs, which feel like they'll be susceptible to damage if you're a little too rough. But overall, for the price you are paying, I think it's perfectly acceptable. It is so cheap that you could literally just buy another one, no problem. But it definitely looks the part. If you spend a little bit extra, you can get these cool striped designs, and I've also seen a few models that come with some retro stickers. So I absolutely love the retro looks of this camera. It's great that it also comes in all these different colors, so there's something for everyone. And it definitely feels smart, very marketed towards a younger audience, being this fun and cool looking camera. So my only real gripe is that it doesn't feel super ergonomical. It is very straight and square, and all around the edges feels a little bit clunky. But this is a $60 camera, so again, I think we can forgive that. Speaking of which, this is a camera that is so simple and easy to use. There's literally no option to change any settings on this really, apart from just turning on the flash and turning on the star filter. It is quite simply a point and shoot and very much designed for someone who doesn't want to mess around with aperture, shutter speed or focusing. So there really isn't much for you to mess up with, making this a really quick and accessible camera that anyone could use. So this is not in any shape or form a pro level camera in any way, so I'm not going to review it from that point of view. This is for a type of person that just really wants like a grab and go type of camera, and it's going to be a really easy camera for them to use. Loading up the film is pretty straightforward. Simply open the back and pop in your film and load it into the take-up spool, taking care to check that the film perforations are engaged with the teeth in the sprocket wheels. Once loaded, close it up and use the shutter button and the film advance wheel until you can see the film counter go up. So when ready, it should be at 1 and you'll be ready to start taking pictures. Now the lens itself is a 22mm focal length, so it's fairly wide and the aperture is fixed at f11. Although one thing to note is that it steps down to f8 when the flash is engaged. However, there is a little bit of a hack with this camera, and that is if you want to shoot at f8 without having the flash engaged, you can simply just turn on the flash and then take out the battery, which is just under this little flap right here, and that will essentially make the camera stay at f8. And then once you want to go back to f11, just insert the battery back in and turn off the flash. So I think that this focal length and the fixed slow aperture makes it very suitable for travel or street photography. The shutter speed is also fixed and it's set to be 1/100th of a second, so it is a little bit slow for my liking. This does mean that shooting subjects that are moving quickly can be difficult to get in focus, and you are better off sticking to slow or still subjects. It's also worth mentioning that you should probably try and keep the camera as still as possible when taking the picture so you don't get any extra camera shake. The aperture of this lens does mean that this camera works better in sunny and bright outdoor locations, although we did try to use it a few times inside buildings just to see what we would get. The built-in flash does mean that it's not totally unusable indoors, but I think you're going to get the best looking images from the H35N on those bright sunny summer days. The focusing distance is set from 1 meter to infinity, so be sure that your subject is not too close to the actual camera if you want to get your images in focus. Now, in terms of the actual quality of the images, I think we do need to set our expectation based on the price of this camera. So since this is essentially a cheap point and shoot camera, so it's obviously not going to take any professional level photos. But what you do get with this camera is that really cool vintage film aesthetic, really organic, dreamlike, vibrant colors, soft grains and textures. So this is why people shoot on film, and this camera is going to scratch that retro itch for sure and get you that timeless vintage look. So a proper SLR camera is no doubt going to get you much better images than this, and you do have to remember that this being a half-frame camera, you are essentially cutting your resolution in half to fit double the images on your film. But in this context, I think it's a great trade-off for essentially getting double the images in a camera that is so simple to use. And like I said before, I love using this for travel and street photography paired with low ISO film. I've mostly been using Kodak Gold 200 with it. I think it just pairs so well with this. One little quirk with this camera being half frame is that when you look for the viewfinder, when the camera is horizontal, the orientation of the image is vertical and vice versa. This doesn't really bother me at all, and it kind of just get used to it really quickly. It also makes this camera quite social media friendly, being portrait mode essentially when holding it like this. So this camera also comes with a star filter, and what this does is it accentuates any light in the image and creates these long streaks of light, which can be really cool, and it's a nice way to add a little creative flair to your images. In my opinion, it can be a little bit distracting at times, but I think in certain situations it works really well. This H35N also comes with a bulb function, so you can actually shoot long exposures on this camera as well. So with all that being said, is this camera worth it? I think to answer that question, we do have to remember who it is designed for. I would say this is a camera aimed at people who are enthusiastic about photography, and it's for someone who wants a dedicated camera instead of using their smartphone, and probably new or newish to photography and film. Let's face it, film photography can be very daunting and a little bit confusing, and not to mention very expensive as well. And I think that cameras like these are a fantastic gateway into the world of shooting analog. I hate that we have this kind of gatekeeping mentality in photography, and I love that cameras like this one are just kind of ignoring all that noise. So for me, I have absolutely loved using this camera. I find that the limitations of this are somehow even more freeing, and it really just forces you to focus on the moment. It also allows you to just focus on the enjoying taking pictures and not being hyper-focused on the settings. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let us know in the comments section below if you would be up for using a camera like this one, and if you would like to get into film as well. And if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!